Is Cars and Bids.
I'm Kennan.
I'm Filippo.
And today we're going to talk about things.
What are we talking about?
Bidding strategy.
My favorite topic.
We get asked all the time, what is the best bidding strategy? How should I best bid in order to win? What's the right bidding strategy? We all have opinions. Mine are correct.
Well,
We'll find out. We've never really discussed. Let's find out what our bidding strategies are. Are you ready?
One of us has won a car on Cars and Bids twice, but it's fine.
Boo! Okay, bidding strategy. Now, this is a topic we get asked about a lot. And to clarify what I mean by bidding strategy, on carsandbids.com, you can bid on cars.
Yeah, accurate.
And some people think that there's a certain way to do it, and other people think that their way is the best, and other people think that their, et cetera, et cetera. Like, there's a lot of strategy that goes in if you want to try to win a car to bidding. Okay. Tell me what your strategy would be, Kennan.
Now, there are a couple different approaches to this. I think they all have validity depending on the car and the situation.
Okay.
If you really, 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 really want a car, let's say it's an unusual specification, it's something you've been searching for a long time, and you know the market, it's a well-defined market, a lot of comparable cars to it, a lot of. You bid your number right away. All the way.
Okay,
Lay it on the line.
We have seen people do this, and by that he means, the auction lasts for 7 days, and the vast majority of bidding action happens in the last 2 minutes of the 7 days.
To be clear, the other days exist for people to do their due diligence, but the last day, that's when
the last day tends to be the bidding. But there are guys who have done it.
Yeah.
There are people who have, when the car is listed, be like, you know what, I think it's worth 35, boom, 35. Now, the benefit, if you're the buyer, is that you kind of kill like the momentum of bidding.
Well, one of the things about
and just kind of show up and be like, I'm gonna do this.
Yeah, which I'm like here for. But because with bidding, one of the things is you do tend to get emotionally involved. You're just, what is another bid? What is another $100? What is another, whatever? And so that kills that immediately. It's like, well, this car, and also people, if they think they can maybe get a deal because the car isn't photographed or whatever,
suddenly they know they can't because this dude already showed up and dropped 50 G's.
Yeah, it's like, well,
now the drawback is that if you do that, maybe bidding only ever would have gotten up to 37 and you put in a 50 bid and you way overpaid.
Maybe, but again, that's why I think it suits cases where it's like, I know I'm not going to find another one because I've been searching for this car for 2 years and I'm never going to find another, whatever.
Yep.
Again, very specific situation. It's not advisable for all cars, but there are, and again, you know the market and you know you want it and you want to win, then I can see that being a viable strategy. However, there are other ones. There's the war of small bids, which we see a lot, where people will go up, like this Hummer, for instance, it's currently going down, like counting down now, going up by $100 bids very slowly over time, just slow. It's like a siege.
Now, this is the strategy that most people use, to be clear.
Yeah.
This is the traditional bidding strategy, which is you go up by basically either the minimum or something close to the minimum, someone else goes up by the minimum. The two benefits to this are, number one, you won't overpay.
Yep.
In theory, because a minimum increment bid will win, meaning that you won the car by a $250 more.
The lowest margin
you could have won.
Yeah.
The drawback is, and the other possibility that you may win is you may just wait out the person. I mean, we've seen some of these minimum increment bid auctions take 45 minutes.
Yeah.
And sometimes the person has a meeting or just loses interest or whatever, and you waited him out. The drawback that I have found with this strategy, we've seen it firsthand with Nick. What a surprise. Is that you throw in these minimum bids and you think to yourself, it's another 250. It's another 250. Your max is 35 grand. It's another 35 250. What's another 250?
Pretty soon you're at
35.5. What's another 250?
Yeah, it happens.
And then the next thing you know, you're at $43,000 because you 250 yourself into this situation. That happens.
That's a dangerous game, but it can work, and that is again, I'd say it's overwhelmingly what we see people do.
Yeah.
And I think that also it kind of depends also if it's a reserve or no reserve car. There's more excitement generally around no reserve cars. And so people actively do that. So I don't know. It's not necessarily my belief. You and I have another approach that we really like, and that is relatively large, very consistent bids. You bid the same number. It's much larger than the minimum amount, and you just do it again and again because it psychologically messes with everybody about this guy just threw down another 5
years ago.
10 grand.
Before our site existed on another auction site, I was bid against using this strategy, and I would bid the minimum. And then the other dude would just go like $5,000 more. And it became clear to me during that auction, like this guy's got deeper pockets and he scared me away.
And he may not have. His max could have been the same as yours.
He may have had the same max as me, but like it scared me. And I believe that is the correct bidding strategy. Now, the drawback to that is, again, you may overpay.
Again, yes.
However, you won't get into this war of attrition of $250 increments where you end up spending the same amount anyway. Because that's one of the things that I primarily find. People do the small increments, and I sit there and think to myself, if you had just bid instead of $250 for 20 minutes, just $3,000 initially, you may have been able to just be like, boom, and kind of stop things.
Saved all that time.
My preferred strategy is very much in the middle. You got to read the room. You got to see what other bidders are engaging with you, what other bidders are bidding. It's very different if there's one other person bidding versus if there's 2 or 3 other people bidding, what that strategy is. I am a big fan personally of getting cars to close to where people will bow out quickly. I did not do this on any auction where I bought, but I thought, think about other auctions. Of like, okay, if you know that car is worth at least 30, don't bother with bids at $10,000. Either come in later once the bid has already escalated to close to market, or just if you really want to go from 10 to 27, knowing that you're below where it's the market, but you lose out a bunch of people that are like, I'm not actually that interested, like I sometimes am. You lose out against them. But then you read the room, right? Sometimes you go up by $100, the minimum increment. Sometimes you go up by a couple thousand. You throw people off a little bit with different increments where like they're mentally thinking, how much is this guy willing to pay?
Right.
How much is the other bidder willing to pay? And you can kind of throw them off a little bit.
Right. That's a fair strategy.
For sure.
You got to be kind of sophisticated to understand how that works.
What your max is.
You do have to know what your max is and stick to it, but also you kind of have to be fairly sophisticated in terms of bidding to understand. Like reading the room is hard for people in an auction that doesn't have a room.
I've watched.
I think that we've watched so many auctions.
Yeah,
we can read between the lines.
It's a little bit doable for us, but like it's not necessarily the easiest for other people, which is why people should just drop giant bids.
I also love. I strongly
it's like
recommend.
you own an auction company or something.
I'm actually not entirely sure though that the drop giant bid strategy actually makes us more money. I think having watched them play out, I really think that the little increments end up bringing more money for us. Yep. The giant bid strategy kind of kills the excitement and momentum.
It really does.
When people are bidding up by $250 each time, again, they psych themselves into going a little higher until they bid 55 times over an hour. And I swear, sometimes I watch some of these and I think to myself, if you would just have, you end up going up $8,000. If you had just gone up $6,000 day one, would the other person have dropped out?
No.
Probably.
I agree with you. I think it's the right strategy. And often I help out with a lot of our moderation. So I look at a lot of comments. And often people are like, why did that person go from 12,000 to 16,000? Well, they knew that strategy can work. Yeah. And like, it's not suspicious. It's just good bidding.
One of the funny things we get a lot of comments on people insisting that some of the bids on the site are suspicious. And actually the thing that people comment about the most is when someone just signs up and then bids and buys a car. This is something that people really are like, that person, they signed up just to bid or they signed up just to buy a car. It's the seller. What honestly,
that car.
And people are skeptical. They think that it's the seller has signed up a separate account just to bid on their own car. What we have found out time and time and time again, this is not suspicious. Almost all of these transactions go through. Yeah. What usually happens is people are lurking and don't bother creating an account until the car that they're interested in shows up. And then they set up an account for that purpose and go and buy a car.
Exactly. It was the case with the guy who bought my 355.
Yep.
Bid on one car. It was mine because he saw a video. He made an account that month and he bought it.
What he did probably was he watched the site as an unregistered guest, which is fine. And then one day the car he wanted showed up, so he makes an account and buys 100%. This happens all the time. It happens every single day, multiple times. It's happened on cars I've sold. And people just freak out about it, but the truth is it's actually pretty common.
It is legitimately the most common behavior. The most common time to place a bid for the first time is the day you sign up
register your account.
Because it's when you're interested. You find out about it.
If you think about it, like degenerate car enthusiasts such as myself, kind of you guys, but more myself.
No, it's more, it's Nick and you,
we'll buy cars. And so we have an account registered 5 years ago and have bid on 86 cars and won 3 of them. Normal people have do a lot more research and diligence and put a lot more thought into it. And so they don't do that. And so they're not ready. They're not like buying. And so people are like, oh, this is suspicious because he hasn't already bought 3 cars on the site. To me, that's kind of the least suspicious.
Right.
That's how, normal people, that someone is a degenerate car enthusiast when they're accusing other people of being fake because they haven't bought 5 other cars.
So true.
That's very real.
I will say, I do love that people look at profiles of other bidders. Yeah. I think that's great. You could get a little bit of information about who else is in the room. You shouldn't be suspicious by that because it's very normal to sign up, but that tells you something about that person too. They're looking for that car. That's good information. Somebody like Nick, Rashawn, who's on these podcasts often, that's bid on a trillion cars. Well, that car caught his eye that day.
Yeah.
How serious
He's
is
not
he?
willing to go
up
high.
to a certain price.
So that's a good point. Looking at the other person, their bid history is also a really good
including
tactic.
lack of bid history tells you that they're in it for that car.
The unnamed car that I lost on the unnamed other site years ago, the dude had vastly overpaid for a different car before.
And you know something.
And it was clear to me that he was ready to vastly overpay for this car. And versus, a Nick who just like tosses a bid in here and there, and me.
And there's a lot of bidders that do have a lot of bids. They might... We certainly have some dealers that buy, some dealers that buy for other clients, some people that are just degenerates. Somebody won a car the other day that's building a car museum, so they've bought a few cars because they're building a museum. But then what price range they're interested in. They know you know their strategy.
Yeah, it's an interesting situation.
It is, and like you said, it's because there's no real emotion involved. It's not like you're in a room.
No, there's
emotion, but it's only to yourself. It's in a kind
sort of. I mean, that can be even harder. Like being in a room at RM is one thing, but like being by yourself and you got no one there to, there's like a mental aspect to that too. That's kind of challenging.
That's true. When Sam bought that E46 M3 on our site, he said, I remember him telling me he put in a bid and he'd walk away. And then he'd come back to it, and then
whenever one of us is like gonna buy a car, we usually do a Google Meet and like it's kind of a nice way to do it. Actually, I've enjoyed that because it actually adds a little bit of like some other voices, which are nice. Now, I will say one other thing. There's 2 types of auctions. There's reserve and no reserve auctions. I would say that my strategy would be a little bit different, potentially, in a no reserve versus a reserve auction. I am always skeptical of people in no reserve auctions who raise the number significantly. It's no reserve,
but its strategy works.
The strategy does work sometimes, but also like in that situation, especially, you may have really screwed yourself out of getting a deal, or you may have just dropped the big bid.
If you want the car,
I guess. But when I see no reserve, I think to myself like, every bid could win, so you got to be a little scary.
That's very interesting. It so depends on how much I care about that car.
Yeah.
The GTI that I bought, that was I meant it to a certain price because I want it to a certain price.
Yeah.
There was no world where I was going to go straight to that price. I wanted the best deal possible because I only wanted the car if it was at a deal that I wanted.
Yeah.
Something like my station wagon, where my bidding strategy was similar but had larger increments. And even there, I did go on some odd increments.
Yeah, you did. What were you thinking?
On the station wagon that I bought, I wanted that car more. I had been in the market for a while. I knew what I was willing to pay.
You bid on that?
Yeah.
He does. He bids on a lot of stuff.
And I was willing to I made some larger jumps, and then I stopped because I was getting too close to my max, right? But like,
don't you get scared though bidding on?
Willing to go.
You're not scared bidding on no reserve, bidding up. It scares me.
It feels slightly odd because you know that you could, but also if you know the market.
But it's the same. The point is the same from before, which is if you want to get into that war of attrition, that can happen on a no reserve auction.
And if you know the market.
Now, one of the things that we allow is on reserve auctions is people to up their own bid. If we decide, it's very rare. It does happen occasionally, but sometimes people will bid and then no one else is bidding and they think that it's not going to clear reserve, they will then up their own bid. I wouldn't necessarily use that strategy unless the seller literally says like another $2,000 in the clear reserve. But even then, you're wondering if the seller's lying to you. You know,
right?
However, it's something that we offer, and it's something that has happened. You know, it happens like once every few months.
We do offer, and luckily we do have a great post-sale team. So as long as you're the high bidder, you can we'll work with you and the seller to help put that together after the fact.
But there is motivation to buy during the auction because then if you are the winner, there is obligation. Then
there's obligation.
The seller's obligated to sell.
Yeah.
After the auction, all bets are kind of off.
After the auction, all bets are off, and people don't really realize that. We have sellers. This happens all the time. We have sellers not sell a car, and then come back to us 2 weeks later, 8 weeks later, and say, "Hey." Actually, I would take that number. Well,
Like,
the buyer found another car, honey.
Right.
That's dumb.
Yeah.
Like you probably should have lowered your reserve. That's probably the mistake that you made at the time. Whereas doing it in the auction is kind of beneficial. And by the way, we do try to still put those together, and often we contact the buyer and the bidder, and they're like, "Nah, I'm out."
I love talking about bidding strategy. Can I bring up my favorite kind of auction that's not related to cars and bids?
Dutch auction. Go ahead.
Dutch auctions.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with this?
Yes, you like.
I find it fascinating.
There was we conceptualized when we thought about cars and bids. We thought about doing it as Dutch auctions.
It's the best. Basically, you start at an amount, and the first person to say, "I will buy it at that amount," wins the car.
And so it starts
down.
from a top number and it goes down.
Yep. For that Macan Turbo, maybe it would start at 50 grand, it goes down, and the first person to say, "I will pay that amount."
As always,
But then you'd never win.
I personally would never win.
as always, the Dutch have it figured out. I think this is an absolutely brilliant thing because you talk about the mental anguish of like, do I go a little higher? Do I go a lot higher? Am I going to win it? Is this going to be the number?
Maximized.
The mental anguish the other way is 10 times worse. Like, oh God, I better go in because someone else is gonna. And if I just sold to somebody else, I could have been. That would be.
It'd be
Rough.
Grappling.
That would be.
It'd be excellent television.
It would be excellent television,
Or at
especially
least for that person.
just a camera on the bidder, just watching and thinking through.
Thinking through the logistics of that and like what would I do stress me just knowing that I would never buy a car.
Yep.
Like just the thought stresses me out, and that's why I love it.
Look, he's sweating already.
You would never do it because you would never get a deal sufficient enough to pursue it.
I would be
Filippo bids
worried
for the
that I
bottom
wasn't
up.
getting a better deal.
that you weren't getting a better deal. Yeah. I love it. Love a good Dutch auction.
That is not what we have on cars and bids. We have very traditional auctions.
So to summarize, then really it depends on the situation. It depends on the car. It depends on the other bidders in the room. But really, it's about like kind of doing your research and then being comfortable with how you're going to potentially win the car.
Yeah, fundamentally, all of bidding comes down to how much are you willing to spend for that car, and how you get there is really up to you. And I do think it depends on the car. If you are you optimizing for a deal, and then you're willing to lose the car as a result? Are you optimizing for getting that car, and then you're willing to put in a big bid early on because you need that car? Mm-hmm. Are you somewhere in the middle, and then maybe you do little jumps? Every strategy is quite legitimate.
I like the big bids.
I like big bids.
I only because I've watched it play out in every direction so many times. And I really think that big bids, and I've had it done to me, and I've watched Nick do the incremental thing, and I've realized big bids is just a way to show up and just like mic drop. Be like, you went up by 250, I went up by $4,000.
It works. It really does work.
Like what you is.
Yeah, if you really want the car.
It so often works.
Yeah. Today,
sometimes you end up overpaying.
There was an auction that I did where somebody did that, and somebody bid $500 up, and it was clear that the original bidder was at his max. He bid 35.
So
somebody else
sometimes
bid 35.5. Sometimes it loses, but he went to his max. He gave it all.
It also kind of conceals the true value of the car, which is kind of nice. Because if you drop your max bid in, you don't have other bidders and potential bidders don't have the ability to see that there was a market. The market agreed that this was the price. If you just show up with a giant bid,
you don't have the consensus.
It's like, this is what I think it's worth. You got to challenge it. And that scares people. I think a lot of people end up getting roped into bidding because they're like, oh, well, it's only $250 more than someone else is willing to pay. So that's what it's worth. Whereas if you can show up and bid $10,000 more than someone else is willing to pay, that scares people into not being sure what the number is. I mean, there's a lot of strategies.
Right. And so if you find yourself on the other end of a bidding war with Doug,
good luck.
Good luck to you.
Can I say two quick things? Our clock resets to a minute with every bid in the final bid.
Oh, great point.
Which is important.
Yep.
Please don't wait till the very last second.
This is
we have optimized the site to an extreme amount to make sure that if you place a bid, it gets recognized right away. That you don't lose as a result. But
by the way,
weird things happen with your own internet.
On the subject,
don't wait till the literal last second.
I actually think there's a strategy in doing it immediately, and that's another thing that I've done. It's
faster.
You want to increase your high bids by $4,000 and someone else is doing minimums, do it the second you have the chance.
Yep.
If you show up at the $4,000 number over their minimum and you do it the second the bid goes in, you're just basically sitting there saying,
"Yep,
get out of here."
Smacking
and
it
also,
down.
they have less time to ponder. If they bid 12,222.
Not only do they have less time to ponder, but they're sitting there thinking, wow, this dude isn't pondering anything. He's bidding.
There are times in wars of attrition where waiting maybe has a benefit. Because you are really trying to tire them out.
Yeah, I think.
But just don't wait till the very last second.
Here is my overarching theme to this, having discussed it now for a little bit with you guys. If you really want the car, and you have a number, but you just want the car, use my strategy.
Yeah.
If you're just like poking around hoping for a deal and you'll buy it if you get it, that's when you do the minimums.
Yeah. 100%.
I think that's the answer.
And that's also when you wait till then. You don't want to bid it up. So if there's 3 bidders in the room, waiting until then tells you that somebody else is out too. But I also don't want people to lose the car by waiting until literal the last second.
No, the last second thing is
that's so silly. We see
wait till 30 seconds or 15 if you have to. And the last second thing is so wild.
The number of times
such a mistake.
Somebody has had internet problems at their house.
Oh, I know. And then they send us an email like it's our fault.
Like,
and
dude, the records show you came in 20 seconds late. What were you doing?
Exactly.
Right. We actually can look that up. And oftentimes it's always the case that the person is 4 seconds late or 9 seconds late and they're mad at us. And it's like, well,
should have bid earlier.
And
why didn't you had a whole minute?
That's how you bid on cars and bids.
That's the answer. That's the answer.
Bid
big. If you really want the car, like big. And if you want a Filippo style deal, do whatever.
Can I answer one question that comes up often that people might be interested in?
Yeah.
You do not have a hold. So when you bid on a car, we place a hold on your credit card in the amount of the buyer's fee. We are not placing additional holds with each bid.
Yeah.
I want that comes up by
it's only the first
daily.
Hold, right?
It's only the first time you bid on that car.
Yeah.
So just if you're curious, that is the mechanism.
All right. Those are our bidding strategy tips. Let us know your bidding strategy in the comments. I am legitimately interested in hearing them. I want to know what other people think about how they think they should bid and win cars.
And please don't bid against me the next time I'm impulse buying a car.
Again, good luck if you're against Doug. I don't bid often.
Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye.